Hey there friends, Dave Paulides, Canadian Missing Project, a copyrighted edition for our video channel. Thanks for being here. A couple of things. First of all, a video that I put up 2 days ago got a lot of hits. And it was an interview I did with retired Special Agent John D'Souza from the FBI, 25-year FBI agent, one of the three primary agents on 9/11. I interviewed John for the movie Missing 411, the UFO Connection, and he talked about portals and multi-dimensions and said they're real. Now, I wouldn't have taken John's word by himself for anything, because I don't take anybody's word for anything. But because I've interviewed physicists about this, namely in the movie I did called Vanished for the History Channel. They flew me up. I talked to physicist John Brandenburg, and he said, yes, portals and multi-dimensions are real. So, another data point for everyone to follow. At the premiere, when I sat down with John, it was just a very loose, casual conversation that I was going to have with him. I didn't know where it was going to go. I didn't know what content we would talk about. It was just wherever. He said some things that were absolutely stunning. And since that time, Angie and I have had dinner with he and his wife. Great people. And I'm indebted to John for sitting down and being in the movie and talking with me like he did. He knows a lot about what's going on in this world, and he's one of the few people that puts it out there. So 90%, 99% of the comments were positive. Some of you were just are angry people. You wouldn't believe anything if anyone told you anyhow, so I'm not sure why you're here, but we are here to follow the hints, the clues, the facts that lead us to different places on Missing 411. And we will continue to interview people and talk to people and read the letters. And here is one that was mailed to me. Hey Dave, I've watched your show now for a couple of years. Watched all your videos, and Missing 411, the UFO Connection is the best one. I gave it a five-star review on Amazon. If you've watched the movie on Vimeo, iTunes, please go and give it a review. All those reviews help, because there is a small group that has tried to steamroll us, and they haven't been successful yet, but they're getting close, with one-star reviews that you read them and it's like they haven't even read or watched the movie. So please go give it a review. I was wanting to know if you will ever release a book about the state of Washington. I hope so. I'm retired with 38 years in and around the U.S. Army. I currently live in Olympia. I grew up in Northern California, Redding and Bernie, close to Mount Shasta, living there at a time when we never thought Mount Shasta was a hot spot, but I guess it was. Spent a lot of time around Redding, burning, fishing, and Bernie area specifically, a lot of weirdness. I was duck hunting with my dad, his friend, and his son in '77 on Big Lake in the MacArthur Fall River Mills area. I was in junior high school. We were on an island. We were all standing side by side looking for ducks, etc. We just arrived by boat. We know you get off a boat and you kind of look around and examine your surroundings. Happy to be there. I dropped my flashlight in the lake as I exited the boat. I'll never forget the light circle shining up from the depths, becoming smaller and smaller as it got black. My dad and I were both upset about it for a second, until we all saw lights in the sky. It was early in the morning before the sunrise. You could see the white clouds and still see stars in the sky. It was completely quiet. 3 small lights came over the hills at our right. It came toward us above the clouds, moving in a zigzag pattern and waiting up for others to catch up, like a game. I know what satellites look like moving through the sky, straight and steady. That's correct. They don't zigzag, they don't change direction, they go straight. They made their way from right to left. Then a large one came from the area and almost directly over us. Then they all four sped up at such a speed that they disappeared at the same time. We were silent the whole time, and we could not believe what we saw. I have only told this story a couple of times for many years. I thought they were out of the atmosphere, but I believe now they were orbs in our stratosphere. My dad saw what he said was a similar light fly over Hatchet Mountain on 299 East in 1980. It was late at night. He and a friend were coming east just over Hatchet Mountain summit. Then a light appeared in the sky right next to them, 50 feet above the trees. He said that the lights were flying next to him, following him from the top of the mountain a couple miles before the Hatchet Visa turnout. Headed toward Bernie, then quickly disappearing in the night sky. He was with another man, and they both talked about the story of the lights until he passed away. I have another story about a dark, tall creature. I was out at night with friends in the woods hanging around Bernie High School in the summer of '81. At that time, there were dark wooded areas past the high school on a dirt road. A friend and I got out of the van and were standing out near the van at the passenger side. I looked up the road, and next to a tree in the dark was this tall thing standing right next to it in a shadow in the moon. And then it took one step, was on the other side of the road and into the darkness, very large stride. It had long arms and legs and was dark in color. I could not see any facial features, etc. My friend and I yelled, jumped in the van, took off down the road scared to death. The weird thing is we weren't driving, and there were two others who never saw anything. As we were driving down the road, and I asked my friend what he saw, and he said the exact same thing I did, a tall dark figure next to a tree that moved. This story I have only told my family. I feel they are skeptical, but I'm okay with that. I kept it short as I could. I always look to the sky at night and early morning in the hopes of seeing more orbs, etc. I've not seen anything else except normal air traffic. Keep up the good work, and I look forward to your next show. Thank you. Well, no, thank you. I gotta say that it is a very rare night that I don't see something that catches my attention. And I have a fourth generation night vision, not FLIR, it's night vision, that Angie and I will sit out on the deck and look at the stars for maybe half an hour, 45 minutes. And we see a lot of satellites. And again, like the satellites, they go slow and steady. They don't deviate direction. But very often we'll see something up there with the satellites that'll be zigzagging, making right turns, flying in and out, doing something odd. And just like the video I showed you 2 videos ago on this channel, where I videoed a strange looking object here in the Flathead Valley. See those things very often. So watch that video. Hey Dave, this pic is from elk hunting in Creede, Colorado 2 years ago. So all this is, and I'll let you see it, it's a kind of a blue light over the top of you're looking up over a summit of a hill. Not a very interesting photo, but a photo nonetheless, and thanks for sending. So, Creede, Colorado. Got a story for you from there. When Angie and I lived in Colorado, we took a week-long trip down to Creede. It's in south of Pueblo. And we fished an area down there. Had a lot of good luck, good fishing. And one night, we were staying in an Airbnb, second floor of this small house. And like I said, we get up, take the night vision with us every place we go. And that area around Creed and east of Creed is historic for cattle mutilations. So at about 11:30, right before we're going to bed, I said, hey, I'm going to get out the night vision. I'm just going to look out the window. And I just about screamed at her. I said, come here now. And she came, and we watched 3 or 4 lights that you could only see with the night vision because they were so dim in color. But they were flying through the mountains to our south, and we got a view of them for about 30 seconds as they were flying east. Never saw anything like that again before. It was probably, elevation somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 feet. It wasn't that high. And they moved individually, but they were moving as a group. So I know Creed. We watched this light as we come up a valley in a snowstorm for about a half hour. It traveled over 40 miles in my guess in the time we saw it. There were 5 of us, and we videoed the whole encounter only to have it disappear from my phone files when we got home. Odd enough right there. It seemed to change color from blue to purple and back. It made a very disturbing humming noise, a deep throbbing hum. I've seen other alien craft, but from varying distances. This one came as close as maybe a few hundred yards from our camp just on the other side of the hill. I've always known that they are here. I've seen one rise from the ocean on a cruise in the Bahamas. Oh, that would be fun. I'd love to see that. Next one. Hey, Dave. I watched your UFO video on your YouTube channel posted on February 16th, 2023. That's what I was just telling you about. Just the other day I posted it. You asked for replies regarding UFOs that have affected me. When I was a young boy living in central Mass in the 60s, my dad saw a UFO that had landed in a field in rural New Hampshire. My dad was a music teacher and band director who traveled to various schools in Mass, New Hampshire, and Vermont. He did not describe it to me when I was young, other than saying that he had seen one. Many years later, my older brother, who was ex-military, told me what our dad told him about the incident. Apparently, Dad had been driving to a school in New Hampshire to teach music lessons when he saw a craft sitting in a field. My brother told me that our dad had stopped his car, got out, and started walking toward the craft located in that field. My dad told him that the craft rose up and flew away as he approached it. My dad had always told me that the UFO looked like the craft seen in the 60s show The Invaders. It was something that stuck with me over the years, as I was maybe 5 or 6 years old when my dad reported his sighting. The odd thing is that my brother was stationed at McCord Air Force Base while in the military as a flight control operator who okayed aircraft landings and takeoffs. My brother told me that an object located by Mount Rainier was observed by him and another person in the flight tower. Other sites were contacted about the object, and they were told that no objects were seen on their radar. My brother told me that the incident was included in Project Blue Book. In last week's Bigfoot class, you mentioned sightings of Bigfoot in New England. My family and I lived in a small town in central Mass. I was 6 or 7 years old visiting a friend at his house, maybe a mile from my home. We had been playing behind his house, and he had to go inside for some reason, and I remained out behind the house. While I was alone, an unseen force knocked me off my feet. I looked around and saw nothing that could have knocked me down. I remember from your Bigfoot class number 2 that there was an incident reported of a hunter being knocked off his horse while going through thick timber. I waited until now to be able to connect the dots about what happened to me. It must have been a young Bigfoot playing a joke on me by knocking me down. My family moved to Washington State when I was 12. As a young man, maybe 17 or 18, I went deer hunting with my next oldest brother on Weyerhaeuser land located in the southwest part of Washington State. Hello! Watch the movie Missing 411, the UFO Connection. The elk that was taken, Weyerhaeuser land, southwest Washington. Could have been the same place. Wake up! We hunted together, which was a good thing. We both felt something was stalking us as we hunted. and decided to terminate the event. We thought that it was a black bear stalking us at the time, but I am now convinced it was something more sinister, perhaps like the creature photographed by Mrs. McAfee from her tree stand. My brother and I carried Winchester 30-30s. We survived and lived to talk about it. Amen. Next story. Hi Dave, absolutely love your channel and have much respect for the humble, honorable person you are. Well, thank you. My sighting took place on Mother's Day 2005 along Highway 21 north of Nisku, heading to Sherwood Park, Alberta. It was about 12:15 a.m. when my hubby and I both saw three bright lights about the height of a low airplane. It was coming from a northwesterly direction. I first thought it was snowbirds from Wainwright Air Force Base, but it was going too slow. Couldn't make out the object's shape, but it must have been very large. All we could see was there are three very large bright lights. Looking closer, it appeared to have about 13 or so smaller lights trailing it, bouncing up and down. As it crossed in front of our vehicle, we looked at each other and said, "What the heck are we seeing?" When I looked out my right passenger side window, it had completely vanished. The next morning, we turned on the TV and saw the exact same thing that we had witnessed 8 hours previous. A fighter pilot with the Mexican Air Force videotaped it, clocked it at 900 miles an hour, and then it shot straight up at lightning speed. They said no technology existed that could maneuver in that manner. The following Thursday, it was on Discovery Channel. They said ufologists said it was not of this world. I then called NAMAO Army Base north of Edmonton and asked if any other persons had reported the incident. The commander I spoke with was very interested in the details and was writing it down. He then said the RCMP in St. Alberta reported the same thing 15 minutes before we witnessed it on Mother's Day evening. Interesting. Next one. Hey Dave, I support and appreciate the content you produce as I come from a family just like many others who believe in hunting and fishing as a way of life. I grew up in Lincoln Park with my wife, who's from Southgate, Michigan. Back in July of 2012, we had some friends over celebrating before we moved our family to Florida for work. I just graduated as an A&P mechanic for airplanes and was eager to work on aircraft. We were all sitting in my backyard in Allen Park at the time, and around 1 a.m. my buddy, who's always looking up and sky watching because he regularly sees objects over LA, California skies. All of a sudden he says, "Guys, look over there. That light is moving in the sky." Now 4 of us are watching this yellow-orange orb tracking from west to east over southeast Michigan. There were patches of clouds, but it was above cloud cover, no blinking lights, and it was moving faster than a jet could. The sighting maybe lasted 1 to 2 minutes. It was close to our house and the jet's flying in a pattern, so every couple of minutes another jet would fly over our backyard. As you can imagine, we plane watch. This orb crossed the space but much higher, 10,000 to 20,000. As we noticed, no aircraft that night. Over the next couple of days, I checked MUFON for sightings and saw similar events that people posted from western Michigan. And then I saw news on CBS about a cluster of orbs over northern Michigan, Sheboygan. All these events happened so close together. Are they linked? As we only saw one, just wanted to share. You know, I think they are all related in some way. Don't know how. Next one. I was watching a video on the strange object you observed in the sky in your area. That was a couple days ago. 4 days ago. I was astonished when you described the identical object I had been observing in the sky over my neighborhood. I live in a rural community 5 miles southeast of Spring Hill, Nova Scotia. I live in a valley area and there is a small mountain called Claremont nearby. I had observed this object over this mountain and the subject is at the same height in the sky as your estimate for the one you have been seeing. It has green, red, and blue lights and flickers or flashes to white sometimes. I've observed this object for months now, every night when it's not cloudy. Although I cannot say definitively when I first noticed it, but I reckon it had been at least a year. I thought I was being paranoid or something, but now I know my gut feeling was right. It is something new, and it was not seeing a star of some kind. It is definitely different from a star. Hope this information helps in some way. Additionally, there has been an uptick of missing people in our area. There have been 2 in the last few days and more than that prior. The most recent 2 actually happened within 48 hours. The 26-year-old woman from a local community called Leamington, Nova Scotia, and a 12-year-old boy from a community called Moncton, New Brunswick. I have not heard if either person's been found. In closing, I found your work to be very interesting, and I've been watching your channel for over 2 years now. Also have your book on Canada's missing people. I commend you on your work and how you inform all of us in a factual manner, unbiased. God bless you and your family, and thank you for what you do. Thank you. Stop and tell you a quick story. Back when we had the movie premiere, a man contacted me, said that he wanted to buy some tickets to the premiere. And he said, Dave, just take it as a donation. I'm not going to go. My family's not going to go, but I just want to help you. But he said, I'm going to be in Missoula in February if we can meet. I said, great. It's about a 2-hour drive from our house to Missoula. Angie and I will do it. So a couple days ago, we met with this man and his family. How can I describe this? One of the most refreshing couple days I've spent with anybody in years. This man and his family were on vacation. The man and his family had lived in Canada for most of their life. And they had a lot of strange experiences. But in short, they moved out of Canada because they didn't want their kids to be taught the woke ideology that he described that was being taught in his area of Canada. And he said he wanted to give his kids a chance at something else. And he wanted them to have the same sort of education he had when he was a child. So they moved out of the country. I won't say where they moved, but they moved out. What followed was a series of conversations about our movie, Missing 411, the UFO Connection, and a series of incidents that happened in this man's life. Unbelievable. And I'll tell you one thing. Told us a story. It was Angie and me and his family were there and having dinner, and said that he went on a Bigfoot weekend with a group. And he said that he was with 2 other people. They were in this area and they were walking along, and they immediately stopped, and he saw a giant 2-legged biped walk between these trees, not too far from where he was at. He said it had to be 7 or 8 feet tall, huge, hairy. It was too dark to see any facial features, but he said it walked behind a tree and was gone. He says it was weird. Then he talked about a series of other interesting events that had happened to him over time. I've learned from interviewing hundreds and hundreds of people that certain people, entities of some type, are attracted to them. And I believe with some other Bigfoot true researchers that once a Bigfoot knows that you've seen it, it's like you're tagged. And for the rest of your life, at odd times, they're going to do things to let you know they're there. Like Angie and I have seen tracks many times. And you say, well, Dave, you probably just are seeing things. No. I'm very careful on what I believe to be a track. But this man described an incident. I'll cover it for you. He was in a country in the Middle East. business. And he was in a room with another individual. And as he and his work partner were getting ready to go to sleep, lights are out, and a big gust of wind goes through this room, and all the windows are closed, air conditioning's off. There's no way for this wind to come out. Then a couple minutes later, he feels something tugging at his blanket, and he's sleeping in a bed, and his partner's sleeping, 10 feet away in another bed, and he screams, he gets up, he goes, "Hey, stop screwing around." And he turns on the light, and his partner's laying there, turned the other direction, half asleep. And then they smell something horrendous in the room, like death. And then they hear a scratching sound in the corner of a room. And he said it was at about that point he started to understand that something very dreadful or demonic was in this room. And his partner and he experienced this over the next couple hours. Every time they turned on the light, the incidents would stop. So he said, okay, that's it. After like 3 or 4 incidents, the odor, he kind of knew what was going on. Called the front desk. They didn't have any other rooms. So one of the guys had to sleep, so they left one light on. He stayed up. He said, I couldn't sleep. And his other partner went to sleep. And that, because the light was on, that was essentially the end of it. But then subsequent to that, other things happened to him. That it was like something might have tagged him or was a hitchhiker with him over time. This man is very smart. And he understands much of this world the way I understand it. And the course of a couple days, I feel very blessed to have met him and his family. In the weeks ahead, I'm going to read you something that he wrote about Ben. And I feel like he's a long lost brother that I have, this man that wrote this about Ben. It was just, I don't know. We were supposed to meet. Angie said that. She said, Dave, we were supposed to meet these people. It was a blessing that we did. Okay. Next letter. Hey Dave, please forgive any mistakes and punctuations, etc. I'm not by any means an adept at typing and composing. I'm responding to your call for information viewers have about UFOs or orbs. Here's mine. A little about me. I'm 53 and a Native American descent. My father's full-blood Muskogee Creek. I live on a small farm in East Texas. Avid hunter, fisherman, outdoorsman. Have been so my whole life. Growing up in a family that hunted for food, etc. Just something I've always done and love for every minute of my doing so. Myself and 3 friends were hunting, camping on a trip and saw a UFO orb approximately 10 to 12 miles northwest of Kerens, K-E-R-E-N-S, Texas, around midnight, December 25th, 96. Merry Christmas. We all grew up in Dallas, going to the same elementary, grade school, high school, and are still close friends. One of the guys of the group family owned a farm where we all spent much of our summer breaks and other holidays running around the woods in the Trinity River bottoms, hunting, fishing, riding ATVs, etc. In exchange, we helped mow, bale hay, feed cattle and other livestock, and just general farm chores, which none of us minded at all because it was just fun to be out of the city and be out in the country. Exactly. The same friends and I go hunting multiple times every year, the same spot, but the trip during Christmas holidays has always been a special occasion that we always make time to get together for. Farm's a little over 500 acres. A good chunk of it is actually in the Trinity River bottoms bordering the river. The portion of the property nearest the river has 100 plus acres of densely wooded land ideal for hunting. Rabbit, quail, turkey, whitetail, hogs, all abundant. It consists of hardwood trees and briar thickets, some swampy. There's one stock pond that's about a half acre in size, typical Texas waterhole for livestock, located near the edge of the pasture just inside the woods and briars. We all met up at my house Christmas night, and getting a bit of a late start leaving Dallas due to my family holiday obligations, but we arrived at the property about 11:30 p.m. Began setting up camp near the pond. This is where we always camp because there's a little clearing around it and an area we hunt is a stone's throw at best from the best hunting on the property and is close proximity to the area we hunt in the woods. I set out immediately, started a campfire. It was slightly below freezing as the other guys began to set up our tent and unloading other camping gear. I had the headlights of the truck on, pointed in the area where I was building the fire. It was hard to get lit because there was a layer of frost. After 15 minutes or so working at it, I finally get the fire lit and going good. Just as I was about to get up and turn off the headlights, when I started to notice that some sort of light was emanating from behind me, gradually getting brighter and brighter, washing out the firelight and truck lights. It became as brighter than daylight. It took me a few seconds to process what was happening, why the fire and the truck lights were being drowned out by another much brighter light. When I stood up and turned around to see what was going on, as I stood and turned around, I see three friends were standing with their backs to me, 20 feet away, shoulder to shoulder, staring at this huge ball of light, rising slowly above the tops of the trees around 700 or 800 yards away, which you figured out later that it had to have been right about the middle of the river channel. I stepped away from the campfire up to where my friends were, all three standing shoulder to shoulder looking at it. We were looking southeast. And I asked my buddy John, who at the time was an active duty Marine, home on leave, if it was a military flare. I already knew it wasn't, but asked anyway. He answered with a quick resounding, "No effing way, man. That thing is huge." It was too bright and large to be a flare of fireworks and wasn't leaving a trail of smoke behind. It rose straight up so far about 50 to 60 feet above the treetops and stopped for 10 seconds, then began moving east slowly. After moving about 50 to 60 yards, it stopped briefly and changed altitude by dropping at a 45-degree angle, paused again briefly, and then shot above the treetops like a bullet. Though we were drinkers and had bought alcohol with us on the trip, we were not drunk, nor were any of us on any kind of drugs. There was no heat that any of us could tell. It was really a cold night, and the thing was so intense that I think we were giving off all the heat. The property is far from any sort of city light pollution, and when there is no moon, it's really dark. On a clear night, you can see the stars beautifully. Even the Milky Way is visible. It was so clear, no clouds at all, really dark. So what happened that night? I became obsessed with trying to figure it out. I spent countless hours, years researching all aspects of the phenomena. One interesting thing is I found that there have been multiple documented reports, sightings of unexplained lights in the sky in the area of Cairns, Texas over the years before and after our sighting, including what was on the MUFON website described as a fleet of lights. Around the next 15 months, I was there with my friend and his family on the same property, helping and mowing and baling, and we stumbled upon a dead steer that was in an advanced state of decay. In Texas, summer heat, humidity, the decay process is pretty fast. No obvious signs of death, and no other cattle were unhealthy or injured. There was a lack of any scavenger signs or predator tracks, not even vultures, which is very odd. The steer had been accounted for no less than 2 weeks prior by the owner. Another thing that was odd was the smell or lack of it. Normally a dead steer has been out for weeks is enough to make anyone within 100 yards lose their lunch, but it seemed to have not much smell at all. I was about 23, 24 years old when this happened, and UFOs were not something that was on my radar, so to speak. Just wasn't something that myself or any of my friends would think about. I became obsessed with answering the questions of what was exactly happening, which has led me through the years and years of news articles, library books, documentaries. I have more questions than answers, really, but there are 2 things that I've come up with. Number 1, what we saw is not at all uncommon. The same or very similar phenomena pops up all over the world, from current time as far back as you can go in history. Similar glowing orbs have been reported and documented by many great, very credible sources from all over the world, such as sailors, example Christopher Columbus, historical astronomers, cave paintings, petroglyphs, and even religious individuals. You are correct. Orbs are very, very real. And much more common than people think, which is one of the reasons I want people to write in about what they've seen. I don't want people to be afraid of these, but I want you to be calm and patient when you see them. Very hard thing to do. When you see something that exciting, your eyes rivet on it, and you tend not to think about pulling out your camera and just maybe, taking a video. So, got a couple interesting ones for you today. 3 stories. 2 of them you're going to see are very similar, and 1 is very different. And let me first get out a email that was sent to me, and it's pretty bizarre. So first of all, I've told you before that when I made this movie, felt like I was being led by my nose down a specific track to understand, to learn, to report. I don't know. But here's this goes. About 3 days ago, I was doing research on some missing people. And I stumbled across a story of a man that disappeared on Catalina Island off of Los Angeles. Never heard a story about anyone missing on Catalina before. Never talked about Catalina to anybody before. And just as I'm ready to go live on this, I get an email about Catalina Island. What are the chances? Come on. Nobody knew this. Here's the email. Hey, dear Dave. In a recent short-length video you just released, you struck a big nerve. You asked if any one of us had seen a UFO and how it has made an impact on their lives. The year was 1980, and I was on a 37-foot sailboat in the Isthmus Cove at Catalina Island. My friend and myself were downstairs playing a hot game of Uno at the mast table. Where I happened to be sitting gave me a good vantage point out the main entrance from down in the galley. What caught my attention at first was a light going back and forth in the sky. Since there were other sailboats moored in the harbor, I just thought it was a mast light bobbing back and forth from the gentle waves rolling in. I turned back to playing cards only to look again when I realized this was something else. Putting my cards down, I motioned toward the hatchway to go out into the cockpit to get a better look. I clearly saw a round, luminous orange orb racing around the clouds, darting back and forth at very high rates of speed. It looked to move with precision and with no effort at all. The clouds lit up and glowed whenever it flew, making it very easy to see. If I had to guess, it was about a mile or 2 out from the cove. Subsequently, it slowed down and started to head into the cove, but at a diagonal. At this point, I truly felt a massive surge of adrenaline, and I didn't know whether to run down and hide or keep watching. The next 10 to 20 seconds, it flew closer, but off at a diagonal pattern, allowing me to see it with the utmost clarity. Inside the beaming light cast around this thing was some type of physical craft. It looked to be solid metal with no windows. At this point, the strange craft was about 1/8 of a mile away and then shot up into the clouds, not to be seen again. I only told one other person this story, and that was my wife when I met her 21 years ago. Obviously, you don't want the ridicule or the backlash from telling this to anyone. But I'm in my 50s now. I don't really care what people think. Thank you for giving me time to... Thank you for giving me your time. The latest movie you made was truly outstanding, Mark. Well, no, thank you, Mark, for that, because this is the weirdest of the weird. I'm telling you, folks, how energy causes these events to come together, I can't explain it. But here's Catalina. So this is Long Beach. This is Los Angeles. Homework assignment. Look up the Battle of Los Angeles. The Battle of Los Angeles. If you don't know about it, this is Catalina offshore. There's a deep, deep, deep channel or trench that goes through this area. Right there at Long Beach, a long, long history of UFOs. In fact, some of the footage in my movie came from Long Beach. Can you believe that? True. So, here we go. The story from Catalina Island. William McNaughton was 74 years old on August 9th, 1921 at 4 p.m. He was vacationing with his kids and grandkids at Avalon. And Avalon is like the main city on Catalina. If you've never been there, you need to go. Avalon is really, really a cute little city. You get there by a ferry from the mainland. You can also get there by helicopter real quick. But the ferry takes you across, and it's beautiful. Good way to spend a day. So William accompanied his granddaughter to a store in Avalon. And the granddaughter said, "Hey, I'm just going to go in for a second and grab something. I'll be right back out." And she said she turned and looked, and her grandfather was standing in the doorway. 2 minutes later, she returns. Grandfather's gone. She walks out the doorway. Avalon's not a big town. She looks up and down the street. Grandfather's gone. Out of sight completely. She looked throughout the village and then went to the family's cottage in Avalon. Told her mom called the police. The police started to search the city. They started to drive around the outskirts of it, and they found two women on horseback who claimed to have seen someone that matched William's description somewhere near the golf course. Now this is important. So the city of Avalon sits right here. This is Avalon Bay. These lines are the routes that the ships take back and forth from the mainland ferries to drop you off. So in Avalon, Grandpa and the granddaughter are in town. He disappears, and supposedly he's seen in this red dot area near the golf course. This purple line is Descansal Street, where the family lived. So he's heading inland, supposedly when last seen. Well, the police thought this is very odd. We should have found this man quickly. And they call up the U.S. Army, who happen to have a battalion training on the island. So they get 100 soldiers out, and they start combing the island from the area of the city outwards, from Avalon. And they have 100 men that go at this for 7 days. On the 17th of August, the family posts a $250 reward to keep searchers in the field and keep the army moving. The family stated that William only had 40 cents on him. It wasn't enough to get him back to the mainland or to get him off the island, so they knew he was still there. One article quoted the army as saying, "This is the most puzzling case in the island's history." The family was interviewed and said that William was one of those unusual 74-year-old men who was in really good shape. He liked to hike everywhere. And there was one other time where he took a hike and he just forgot to come back. Eventually he did come back and they found him, but he was gone for a long time. And they thought, well, maybe this is the case this time. But he was different because he was so healthy for being 74. Statement by the police 10 days into the search. If he's deceased, then where's the body? And why can't we find it? Well, during that 7-day search, the Army also put up 2 airplanes that crisscrossed the island looking for him. Another article by the police said the earth seems to have swallowed this man up. He was never found. Some people said, well, maybe he fell off a cliff into the ocean. Okay, well, possible, I guess. So as I stated, the area between Catalina Island and Long Beach is known to have a very, very deep trench. And there's been a lot of USOs, unidentified submerged objects, and UFOs in this area. Just like I just read to you. I still can't get over that. I just found that man just sent me that. The timing is impeccable. Is that a coincidence? I don't know. But the Catalina Island also has a story about it. A lot of questions about whether it's true or not. But back in the early 1900s, late 1800s, there was research being done on the island. And there were archaeological excavations done about Native Americans that live there. There was some research that was brought forward about possible giants that lived on the island. Some people discounted the research and said that it wasn't true, that the research was flawed, but you could look it up online. It's kind of an interesting story for Catalina. And just so you do know, the area around Catalina is known for sailboats, fishing. It's a nice area. Okay, the next 2 stories. One of the stories is brand new. Nobody's ever heard it. The first story I'm going to tell you, it does come out of the Idaho book. And both these stories are about Idaho. When Angie and I took the trip around Idaho to visit some of the locations where these things happened, to say that we were stunned would be an understatement. The people we met, the stories we heard, when the people don't even know who we are, bizarre. The first story involves a man named Lowell Smith. Lowell at the time was 60 years old, October 5th, 1968. Remember the date, 10/5/68. He was elk hunting at a place called Pilot Knob in Idaho. Very famous for elk hunting. Lowell had an interesting life. He played professional football for the Green Bay Packers early in his life. And now he lived and worked in the small city of Fernley, Nevada. He was a superintendent for the United Sarah Mining and Milling Company. This story that I'm telling you is in Missing 411 Idaho. Now, he went elk hunting on October 5th. And he disappeared. Other people went looking for him, couldn't find him. His wife didn't hear from him. Called the local Idaho County Sheriff. Now, in a 5-day span, around October 5th, 1968, 4 hunters disappeared. Idaho County was dealing with 3 hunters who disappeared in their jurisdiction in that time frame. So they were spread very thin. Now, 2 helicopters were dispatched to fly a very rugged company around the area where Lowell disappeared. And there was a significant ground team that went out because his was the first case of the disappearances. On October 9th, searchers reached his rural camp. And it was in a place called the Lightning Creek Drainage. They found his cigarettes that he smoked in the fire pit. They found ammunition, food, a tent, and a sleeping bag. All as you'd expect it. But they found something that made them take a deep breath. They found Lowell's rifle in camp. Anybody who's been in the outdoors and you're there for hunting, you don't leave your camp without a rifle. Hunter would never leave camp without a rifle. So there was a 5-day search and rescue. They found nothing. Lowell was an influential person in Nevada. And the Nevada governor heard about his disappearance, and his milling company and his wife called the Nevada governor and asked him to request assistance from the Idaho governor for more searching. This is kind of how more resources are allocated for missing people. The greasy wheel gets the assistance. So the Idaho governor calls for the Idaho National Guard to go into the area and search. An extraordinary effort for the time. 100 men set up camp where Lowell's camp is at, and they searched for 7 days. Lowell was described as an extremely experienced outdoorsman, in good shape, wouldn't get lost, had hunted this area before. National Guard searches for 2 weeks. They find nothing. Here's the question. Why would Lowell leave camp without his rifle? The only thing I could think is go use the restroom. But that would be a short, quick trip. Short of that, I have no idea. None. And I thought, well, if there was a crime involved and somebody hurt Lowell, maybe killed him and buried him, well, then I think that criminal would take the rifle. But nothing was missing from camp. So Lowell's search and rescue started on October 6th, 1968. And what happens then? Another hunter in the same county disappears. This right here, Grangeville, Idaho. Pilot Knob. This is where Lowell disappeared. This is where the next hunter disappears. Salmon River Basin. Huge cluster of missing people here. Cluster here, cluster here, cluster here. Elk City. I've told you this story before. I'll say it again. Film crew at Elk City at a site said they were there about a possible ghost at this old mine. And a group of locals to Elk City on ATVs went in with them to loan them their ATVs to help them get into the site. So people other than the film crew validate the story, and they say that they're all standing in a ridgeline, kind of looking down this valley. And suddenly, out of nowhere, a member of the crew takes off at a dead run as fast as anything imaginable. Never seen again. Just ran into the woods, gone. Boop. Stories in the book, Missing 411 Idaho. I just want to show you in that area. This is weird. So a day after Lowell disappears, a man named Bernard Roscoe, 45 years old, 25 miles south from where Lowell disappeared, same county, goes missing. He's elk hunting with friends from his city in Cottonwood, Idaho. And he and his friends had been to this area before in the Salmon River Basin. At the beginning of October 6th, his buddies go one way, he goes another way. goes elk hunting. Both he and Lowell are elk hunting. Elk hunting. And Bernard didn't come back that night. Well, they search for him early the next morning, shoot off rounds, don't get anything. The next morning they call Idaho County Sheriffs, who are now strapped really thin because now they have 2 other searchers going on besides the one for Bernard. The third search was successful and they found the hunter. Lowell Smith's search is still going on, and now they have Bernard Roscoe, also disappeared, in their county. So the Idaho County Sheriff sends out Deputy Chuck Pittman to organize the search for Mr. Roscoe. They got a series of hunters and fish and game wardens to respond, and they start searching the area. The 3 disappearances, the newspapers reported, made a triangle. Now, I don't really know one part of the triangle, 2 part of the triangle. So the third is either here or here. My guess is it's over here by Elk City, but it's just a guess, because that's where so many other people have disappeared. But that third person was found. So they start searching for Mr. Roscoe. Very, very experienced hunter. Knew the Salmon River Basin. Was heavily armed. Didn't come back. So Pittman starts searching, and he gets 12 fish and game members and local hunters. And just as they start to search, fog and light rain started to inundate that area where they were searching. So fog lasted a couple days. The search lasted just 3 days. The Idaho County Sheriffs were so depleted, they didn't have the people to help. Fish and Game was depleted because they were looking for 3 different people. But friends and relatives from Cottonwood responded and searched for 6 more days. So imagine this scenario. If you're the sheriff, you have 2 really experienced hunters disappear in back-to-back days, 25 miles apart. Neither one is ever found. No evidence of what happened to them. In one scenario, the man disappears from a rural camp in the middle of nowhere, leaving his rifle behind. Come on now. Completely bizarre. The second one, man knows the area. Everyone said he wouldn't get lost. He got lost, he's never found. Then you have weather that inundates the area. Both men disappeared in cluster areas. And in fact, as I've stated before about Idaho, this specific area of Idaho has so many people missing under so many strange circumstances. It's almost as though something has to be going on here. And then you take into the fact that these 2 men disappear in back-to-back episodes. That's a little too much. But I've had a lot of good compliments about Missing 411 Idaho. Thank you for all of those. That's our most recent book. I really appreciate all the kind words that you've given me about our work as of late. Thank you. And all the supportive commentary on the videos. If you can share the videos, I'd be grateful. I'd be very, very grateful if you would do something kind for somebody in your community. Maybe drive a van for the night that passes out free food to the needy. Maybe volunteer at a shelter. And you know, I've done this with Angie a couple times. It really gives you a different feeling once you do something like that. And you're around people that are just wholly appreciative that anyone cares to serve them a meal and be polite to them and smile at them. If you've never done it, you got to do it. And then make a donation to help that facility more with their food needs. It's a good thing. We may not have the money to donate, but we probably have the time to. So, our books, DVDs to the movie are available at our website, NA, like North America, nabigfootsearch.com. Go to the store, find all of our books, videos, etc., posters. All of them are there. Under the comments section of this video, just read the comments. I'll have a pinned statement. That's the number one statement. In the pinned statement, I'll have a list of videos and interviews I've done that you may want to watch. So thank you. Stay warm. We have some cold days ahead here in Montana. But be nice to your neighbors. Paulides out.